When hell comes knocking. The day Rebecca Martinez tried to steal my grandfather's Purple Heart medal from our front porch display, she sealed her own fate. What she didn't know was that she'd just committed a federal crime against a retired ATF, explosives investigator who specialized in taking down organized crime families, and suburban HOA boards run exactly like the mafia. 6 months later, her luxury Lexus would be crushed into a cube, her real estate empire would crumble, and she'd be wearing orange jumpwits instead of designer blazers. But the sweetest part? She handed me every piece of evidence I needed to destroy her, gift-wrapped with a bow made of her own arrogance. Ever wonder what happens when an HOA dictator picks the wrong family to terrorize? Drop your craziest, power-hungry neighbor stories below. Some of you might have federal cases and not even know it. And let me know where you're tuning in from, because HOA Hidden Stories is spreading the revolution against suburban tyranny nationwide. Before we dive into this beautiful destruction, hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell. This channel is your weapon against corrupt community associations, and today's story proves that sometimes the best defense is a perfectly executed offense. Rebecca learned that lesson the hard way. I'm Detective Jake Rodriguez, 52, recently retired from the ATF after 26 years investigating organized crime, racketeering, and federal explosives cases. Last year, my wife Carmen and I bought my grandfather's old house in Sunset Ridge Community, a 95-unit development that looked like paradise, but turned out to be a suburban concentration camp. Grandpa Miguel had been a Marine Corps demolitions expert in Korea, earning 3 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart before building a landscaping business that employed half our neighborhood for 40 years. When he passed, he left us his 200-square-foot ranch house and a lifetime of stories about fighting real enemies, not plastic dictators with clipboards and too much time. Carmen teaches high school Spanish while battling stage 2 breast cancer, undergoing chemotherapy that leaves her exhausted but never defeated. Our twin sons, Alex and Diego, both seniors heading to college in the fall, help maintain Grandpa's memorial garden where his military decorations are displayed in a weatherproof case, a shrine to real heroism that would soon trigger a suburban. War Rebecca Martinez, no relation, unfortunately, ruled Sunset Ridge like a discount Mussolini in $2,000 pantsuits. At 48, she'd transformed from failed insurance agent to HOA president to real estate mogul, using community governance as her personal ATM machine. Her silver Lexus GX460 with Prez 4 Life vanity plates served as a mobile throne, cruising our streets like a patrol car hunting for violations. She lived in the Corner Mansion, a 4,500-square-foot monument to stolen money with fortress walls and security cameras aimed at everyone except herself. Her husband, Dr. Eduardo Martinez, ran the town's largest medical practice while Rebecca ran our neighborhood like her private gulag. But I didn't understand the scope of her operation until she made her first critical mistake, touching a veteran's medal earned in blood and displayed in honor. That single act of theft would trigger a federal investigation that revealed Rebecca wasn't just a petty HOA tyrant. She was running a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise disguised as community management. The morning everything changed started like any other. Carmen was in the kitchen preparing for another chemo session. The twins were loading their trucks for construction summer jobs, and I was watering Grandpa's roses when Rebecca's Lexus pulled into our driveway like she owned it. She emerged wearing her standard uniform, designer business suit, matching handbag, and the expression of someone who'd never been punched in the mouth but desperately needed the experience. Her perfume arrived 5 seconds before she did, a choking cloud of entitlement and Chanel that could strip paint. "Mr. Rodriguez," she announced with the authority of someone who'd confused HOA presidency with actual governmental power, "this military display violates our aesthetic guidelines and must be removed immediately." She was pointing her perfectly manicured finger at Grandpa's Purple Heart, Bronze Stars, and American flag display case built into our front porch with the same precision he'd once used to disarm North Korean mines. "That's a memorial to my grandfather," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. "Miguel Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps, Korea, 1950 to 1953. Rebecca's smile could have frozen lava. "Community standards apply to everyone, Mr. Rodriguez. Patriotism doesn't exempt you from architectural compliance." She actually said that. About a Purple Heart. About a man who'd bled for this country while she was stealing from it. "The review committee meets in 8 weeks, she continued, consulting her iPad like she was reading scripture. "I'm sure you can find appropriate indoor display options by then." That night, Carmen found me standing guard over the memorial at 2 a.m., my old service weapon cleaned and ready for whatever came next. "Jake," she said softly, touching my shoulder with hands weakened by chemotherapy. "She doesn't know who she's dealing with. Show her what happens when criminals target the wrong family." My wife was right. Rebecca had just declared war on someone who'd spent 26 years dismantling criminal organizations more sophisticated than her suburban crime syndicate. She thought HOA bylaws made her untouchable. She was about to discover the difference between community governance and federal racketeering. Charges. The first battle, Rebecca's opening assault, came at 6 a.m. sharp, because apparently evil keeps bankers' hours. I woke to find a $750 fine taped to our front door, officially citing unauthorized military paraphernalia display violating architectural harmony standards. The paper was still warm from her laser printer, perfumed with the scent of bureaucratic tyranny, but Rebecca had made her first tactical error. She'd put her theft attempt in writing, creating a federal paper trail that would eventually lead straight to her prison cell. 26 years of investigating organized crime had taught me that criminals always document their own destruction. They can't help themselves. The fine notice included photographs of our memorial taken with professional equipment, time-stamped at 5:47 a.m. when any normal person would be sleeping. Rebecca was conducting surveillance operations on a veteran's family, behavior I'd seen from mob enforcers and domestic terrorists. Carmen studied the document with the analytical mind that made her an excellent teacher. "Look at this language, Jake. Unauthorized military paraphernalia. She's classifying Purple Hearts as contraband. This woman isn't just corrupt, she's un-American." The twins were furious in the way only 18-year-olds can be when someone disrespects their great-grandfathers. Service. "Dad," Alex said, his jaw tight with controlled anger. "Tell us what you need. We'll help destroy this bitch." I was proud of his loyalty, but concerned about his language. Carmen just nodded approvingly. That afternoon brought Rebecca's psychological warfare phase. Her Lexus began cruising past our house every 30 minutes, slowing to a crawl while she photographed our property from multiple angles. She was building a surveillance file like I'd seen FBI agents compile on organized crime suspects. The message was clear. I see you, I'm watching you, I control this neighborhood, and resistance is futile. It was textbook intimidation. The same tactics I'd witnessed during racketeering investigations. Rebecca was running our HOA exactly like a crime family, complete with surveillance, intimidation, and tribute collection disguised as community fees. But she'd chosen the wrong target for psychological warfare. 26 years of facing down bomb makers, drug cartels, and organized crime figures had left me remarkably calm under pressure. Rebecca's suburban intimidation campaign felt like being threatened by an angry kindergartner with a clipboard. The real revelation came during my first HOA board meeting, held in the community center that reeked of industrial coffee and broken dreams. Rebecca presided from an elevated chair like a discount judge, surrounded by board members who looked like hostages reading prepared statements. The meeting followed a script that would have impressed Stalin. Rebecca announced agenda items without discussion, called for votes before anyone could object, and documented unanimous approval for every motion. The other board members sat in terrified silence, occasionally glancing at Rebecca like abuse victims checking their captor's mood. "Any new business?" Rebecca asked with the tone of someone hoping the answer was no. I stood slowly, feeling every pair of eyes in the room focus on me. "I'd like to discuss the constitutional implications of restricting veterans' memorial displays and request detailed financial records for all HOA expenditures over the past 5 years." The silence was profound. Rebecca's face cycled through surprise, anger, and calculation in about 3 seconds. "New residents need to understand that established procedures govern all community requests," she said finally. "We don't accommodate individual preferences that disrupt neighborhood harmony." But I'd seen her board members' faces during my request. These weren't co-conspirators. They were victims, intimidated into compliance by someone who'd weaponized parliamentary procedure. The real criminals were Rebecca and whoever was helping her steal from our community. After the meeting, an elderly woman approached me in the parking lot. "Eleanor Santos?" she whispered, glancing around like we were plotting revolution. "I've been keeping records for 3 years. Your grandfather would be proud of you for standing up to that witch." Eleanor pressed a manila folder into my hands. "Financial irregularities," she whispered. "Missing money, fake receipts, vendor payments, to companies that don't exist. She's been stealing from us for years, but everyone's too scared to fight back." That folder would become the foundation of the federal case that destroyed Rebecca's criminal empire. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of her operation and identify all co-conspirators. Rebecca thought she was fighting a retiree with a military memorial. She was actually facing someone who'd built careers on dismantling criminal organizations exactly like hers. The war was just beginning, and Rebecca had no idea she'd already lost. Reconnaissance and discovery. My ATF training had taught me that successful investigations require methodical intelligence gathering before any direct confrontation. Rebecca wanted to play games? Perfect. I'd spent 26 years playing games with criminals, far more sophisticated than a suburban HOA dictator. I converted my home office into an investigation command center, complete with evidence boards, financial tracking charts, and surveillance schedules that would have impressed my old federal task force. Carmen called it beautiful overkill and started bringing me coffee at 2 a.m. when she found me cross-referencing vendor payments with shell company formations. The first phase involved understanding Rebecca's daily patterns, her associates, her income sources, and her vulnerabilities. Professional surveillance is an art form, and Rebecca made it easy by maintaining rigid schedules that suggested obsessive-compulsive behavior combined with criminal overconfidence. Every morning at 6 a.m., patrol the neighborhood photographing. Potential violations. 7 a.m., Starbucks for overpriced coffee and gossip gathering. 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., real estate appointments using community connections for lead generation. Noon, HOA office hours in her home, conducting community business like a mob boss holding court. Her afternoon routine revealed the scope of her operation. Multiple meetings with contractors, landscapers, and service providers who all seemed nervous. Around her, cash payments for services that should have been billed to the HOA. Vendor invoices that didn't match actual work performed. But the smoking gun was hidden in Eleanor's financial records. Rebecca had established 6 different shell companies over the past 4 years, all awarded exclusive contracts with our HOA. Martinez Property Management, Sunset Landscaping Solutions, Community Excellence Services, Ridge Maintenance Corp., Martinez Consulting Group, and Elite HOA Services. Every company shared the same registered address, Rebecca's home, office, the same phone number, the same bank account routing numbers that I traced through public records. She wasn't just embezzling HOA funds. She was running a sophisticated money laundering operation disguised as community management. The financial analysis revealed systematic theft on an industrial scale. Our annual HOA budget was $340,000, covering landscaping, pool maintenance, community center upkeep, and administrative costs. But comparable communities spent 40–60% less for identical services, meaning Rebecca was inflating every contract to fund her criminal empire. Dr. Martinez, her husband, wasn't just a passive beneficiary. Medical practice records showed suspicious cash deposits that coincided perfectly with HOA vendor payments, patient billing irregularities that suggested insurance fraud, equipment purchases through Rebecca's shell companies that violated federal healthcare regulations. This wasn't just HOA embezzlement. This was a family criminal enterprise using community association governance as cover for multiple federal crimes. Rebecca and Eduardo were running the neighborhood version of organized crime, complete with intimidation, money laundering, and systematic theft from their own neighbors. The breakthrough came when I discovered Rebecca's most sophisticated scam. She'd been submitting fraudulent insurance claims for community property damage, then hiring her own shell companies to perform repairs that were either unnecessary or never actually completed. Over 4 years, she'd generated over $280,000 in fake insurance payouts while collecting another $400,000 in inflated service contracts. Carmen studied the evidence with the same intensity she brought to lesson planning. "Jake, this is RICO territory. She's running a continuing criminal enterprise with multiple co-conspirators. The pattern of racketeering activity is clear as day. My wife was right. Rebecca had created a textbook example of organized crime disguised as suburban governance. Every element was present: ongoing criminal enterprise, multiple violations of federal law, pattern of racketeering activity, and use of intimidation to maintain control. But I needed more evidence before involving federal authorities. Rebecca was smart enough to maintain plausible deniability for most operations, and successful prosecutions require overwhelming proof of criminal intent. I needed her to make mistakes, reveal her methods, and expose her co-conspirators. That's when I implemented Phase 2 of my investigation, controlled provocation, designed to trigger Rebecca's overconfidence and force her into increasingly reckless behavior. Every criminal has a breaking point where self-preservation gives way to ego and rage. Rebecca was about to discover hers. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would appear to comply with her memorial removal demand while secretly documenting every aspect of her operation. Let her think she'd won while I built the federal case that would destroy her entire criminal empire. Rebecca thought she was fighting a grief-stricken veteran over a Purple Heart display. She was actually facing someone who'd dismantled the Torino crime family, the Gulf Coast drug cartel, and 3 domestic terrorist cells. Her suburban intimidation tactics were about to meet federal law enforcement expertise, and the collision would be spectacular. The bait and switch, my apparent capitulation, was perfectly calculated to trigger Rebecca's criminal overconfidence. I called her office and left a message that dripped with defeated resignation. "Mrs. Martinez, I've decided to comply with the memorial removal request. Could we schedule a time to discuss appropriate indoor alternatives?" Her return call came within 20 minutes, voice bright with victorious satisfaction. "Mr. Rodriguez, I'm so pleased you've decided to work within our community guidelines. This shows real maturity and respect for neighborhood harmony. We scheduled a meeting for Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m., Rebecca's standard time for conducting what she probably considered diplomatic negotiations with defeated residents. What she didn't know was that every conversation would be recorded, every document photographed, and every interaction analyzed for evidence of criminal behavior. Carmen helped me prepare the surveillance setup with the precision of a military operation. Hidden cameras in 3 rooms, audio recording devices disguised as household items, and backup systems that would capture everything, even if Rebecca discovered the primary equipment. "Remember," Carmen whispered as we tested the equipment, "let her talk. Criminals love to brag about their schemes when they think they've won. She'll confess to everything if you just give her the chance. Thursday afternoon, Rebecca arrived with the punctuality of someone who genuinely believed she was conducting important government business. She wore her most expensive suit, carried her leather portfolio like a briefcase, and surveyed our home with the calculating eyes of someone evaluating real estate values. "This is a lovely property," she said, settling into our living room like she was holding court. "Properties that comply with community standards always appreciate faster than those that don't." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Play by her rules or watch your investment value decrease through mysterious bureaucratic warfare. I nodded thoughtfully while adjusting the hidden camera angle. "I appreciate you taking time to meet with us," I said, channeling my best impression of a defeated homeowner. "Obviously, we want to do what's best for the community." Rebecca's smile was genuinely warm for the first time since I'd met her. She thought she'd broken another resident, added another victory to her collection of neighborhood conquests. Her guard was completely down. "The thing you need to understand, Mr. Rodriguez, is that HOA leadership requires making difficult decisions that individual residents might not initially appreciate. We have to think about the bigger picture, long-term property values, community reputation." She was warming to her favorite subject, the burden of absolute power and the necessity of occasionally crushing little people for their own good. I made encouraging noises while the recording equipment captured every word. "Take your memorial situation," Rebecca continued, leaning forward conspiratorially. "I have nothing against military service, obviously, but certain displays attract the wrong element, if you understand my meaning. We work very hard to maintain specific community demographics." There it was, the first admission of discriminatory intent based on military status. She was literally confessing to federal civil rights violations while thinking she was educating a new ally about community leadership philosophy. "I notice you run several successful businesses serving the community," I said, pretending to examine her portfolio materials. "That must require significant coordination with HOA operations." Rebecca's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. She was desperate to brag about her sophisticated operation to someone she considered safely defeated. "Oh, it's quite complex," she said, pulling out organizational charts that looked like criminal enterprise flowcharts. "You need multiple service providers to avoid any appearance of conflicts of interest." She actually showed me diagrams of her shell company network, complete with arrows showing money flow between entities. It was like watching a mob accountant explain money laundering techniques to someone she assumed was too stupid to understand the implications. "This company handles landscaping," she explained, pointing to Martinez Landscaping Solutions. "This one manages pool services, this handles general maintenance, and this provides administrative consulting. All completely separate businesses that just happen to coordinate very efficiently." The coordination was so efficient because they were all owned by the same person, but Rebecca was careful not to explicitly state that connection. She was criminally smart, but not smart enough to avoid documenting her criminal enterprise for federal investigators. "And the community benefits from these business relationships?" I asked innocently. "Enormously," Rebecca said, warming to her subject. "We get premium services at competitive rates because these companies understand our specific requirements. They know which residents need closer attention, which properties require more frequent monitoring, which situations demand immediate response." She was describing a surveillance and intimidation network while presenting it as premium customer service. The woman was literally confessing to running a criminal enterprise while thinking she was demonstrating superior management skills. The meeting lasted 90 minutes, during which Rebecca provided enough evidence to support federal charges for racketeering, money laundering, civil rights violations, mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit numerous felonies. She handed me business cards for all 6 shell companies, complete with contact information that would lead investigators directly to her personal bank accounts. As she prepared to leave, Rebecca delivered the final piece of evidence that would guarantee her federal conviction. "Mr. Rodriguez, I hope you understand that communities like ours require certain standards to maintain property values and social harmony. We can't allow individual preferences to undermine everything we've built. Here, she paused at the door, clearly enjoying what she considered a diplomatic victory. I trust we won't have any more misunderstandings about community compliance. People who cooperate find life much more pleasant than those who don't. The threat was clear, recorded in high-definition audio and video. Rebecca had just confessed to running a protection racket while documenting her criminal enterprise and threatening retaliation against anyone who didn't pay tribute to her suburban crime family. After she left, Carmen and I reviewed the recordings. With the satisfaction of federal agents who'd just convinced a mob boss to confess on camera. "She's going to federal prison," Carmen said simply. "The only question is how many co-conspirators we can take down with her." Phase 3 of my investigation would involve confirming the full scope of Rebecca's criminal network, identifying all victims, and building an airtight case for federal prosecutors. Rebecca thought she'd won our first battle. She'd actually just provided enough evidence to destroy her entire criminal empire. The war was far from over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The network unraveled. The beauty of Rebecca's overconfidence was that she'd essentially handed me a roadmap to her entire criminal operation. Her shell company business cards contained account numbers, addresses, and contact information that led directly to bank records, vendor relationships, and co-conspirator networks that spanned 3 counties. My ATF experience had taught me that successful criminal investigations require understanding the complete organizational structure before making any arrests. Take down the small players too early and the main targets disappear. Wait for the perfect moment, and you can destroy the entire enterprise simultaneously. I spent the next 2 weeks conducting surveillance that would have impressed my old federal task force. Rebecca's daily routine revealed meetings with contractors who looked nervous, cash transactions that violated banking regulations, and document exchanges that suggested systematic fraud across multiple business sectors. The first major breakthrough came when I followed Rebecca to a storage unit facility on the industrial side of town. She spent 30 minutes inside Unit 247, emerging with boxes of documents and several laptops that she loaded into her Lexus with obvious care. Storage units are where criminals keep evidence they don't want found in their homes or offices. That evening, I called my former ATF partner, Special Agent Maria Santos, now working financial crimes for the FBI. "Maria, I've got a suburban crime family running a multi-million-dollar operation through an HOA. The evidence package is federal prosecutor porn." "Jake, you're retired," Maria laughed. "Supposed to be playing golf and complaining about kids." These days, this woman stole my grandfather's Purple Heart Memorial and threatened my family while my wife is battling cancer. She picked the wrong veteran to mess with. The tone of Maria's voice changed immediately. "Send me everything you have. If this is as solid as your old cases, we'll make it a priority." The evidence package I compiled over the next week was 347 pages of financial records, surveillance photographs, recorded conversations, shell company documentation, and victim statements that painted a clear picture of organized criminal activity disguised as community governance. Rebecca's network was more sophisticated than I'd initially suspected. She'd partnered with 3 other HOA presidents in neighboring communities, sharing vendor contracts and splitting profits from inflated service agreements. Together, they'd stolen over $2.3 million in community funds while maintaining reputations as dedicated volunteers. The insurance fraud alone was staggering. Rebecca had filed false claims for storm damage, vandalism, and equipment failures that never occurred, then hired her own shell companies to perform repairs using the cheapest possible materials while billing for premium services. The insurance companies had no idea they were being systematically defrauded by a coordinated network of criminals. But the most damaging evidence came from Rebecca's own records, recovered through methods I can't detail, but which were completely legal under federal surveillance guidelines. Her personal computer contained spreadsheets tracking every illegal transaction, communications with co-conspirators discussing profit distribution, and detailed plans for expanding operations into additional communities. The woman had documented her own criminal enterprise with the thoroughness of a federal accountant, apparently believing that HOA governance provided immunity from criminal prosecution. Her hubris was breathtaking and ultimately fatal to her freedom. Carmen discovered the most shocking revelation while reviewing medical practice records. Dr. Eduardo Martinez had been billing Medicare for services never provided, using shell companies, owned by Rebecca to purchase medical equipment at inflated prices, and claiming fraudulent tax deductions for charitable donations to organizations that existed only on paper. "Jake," Carmen said, studying the financial analysis with her teacher's eye for detail, "they've been stealing from everyone. HOA funds, insurance companies, Medicare, the IRS. This is a family crime syndicate masquerading as respectable professionals." The victim impact was devastating. Elderly residents on fixed incomes had been paying inflated HOA dues to fund Rebecca's criminal lifestyle. Young families had been targeted with bogus fines designed to generate revenue. Military veterans had been systematically harassed to discourage questions about financial irregularities. Eleanor Santos provided the final piece of the puzzle when she revealed Rebecca's threats against previous board members who'd asked uncomfortable questions. "3 people moved away rather than fight her," Eleanor whispered during one of our clandestine meetings. "She made their lives hell until they couldn't take it anymore. Witness intimidation, systematic harassment, and constructive eviction of residents who threatened her operation. Rebecca wasn't just stealing money. She was terrorizing an entire community to maintain her criminal enterprise. The federal case was solid, but I wanted more than just Rebecca's conviction. I wanted to ensure that every victim received justice, every co-conspirator faced prosecution, and every dollar stolen was recovered with interest and penalties. That's when I implemented Phase 4 of my investigation, controlled exposure designed to force Rebecca into making desperate mistakes that would provide evidence of her most serious crimes. Criminals under pressure always escalate their behavior, and escalation leads to federal charges with mandatory minimum sentences. Maria Santos called on a Friday evening with the news I'd been waiting for. "Jake, the federal prosecutor loves this case. We're opening a full investigation under RICO statutes. Organized crime, continuing criminal enterprise, the whole package. Rebecca Martinez is going to federal prison for a very long time." "When do we move?" I asked. "Soon. But we want to catch them in the act of destroying evidence. Let them know an investigation is coming, then watch them panic and make mistakes. You've built the foundation. Now let's construct the gallows." The trap was set with the precision of a military operation. Rebecca thought she was running an untouchable criminal enterprise. She was about to discover that federal law enforcement takes very seriously anyone who steals from veterans, commits healthcare fraud, and runs organized crime operations in American neighborhoods. The endgame was approaching, and Rebecca had no idea she was already checkmate. The pressure campaign. The controlled exposure began with surgical precision designed to trigger Rebecca's paranoia without revealing the full scope of federal investigation. I started by filing official complaints with state regulatory agencies, creating paper trails that would force her to respond and hopefully make incriminating statements. The first complaint went to the state insurance commissioner, documenting suspicious claims patterns and fraudulent repair work. The second went to the medical licensing board, detailing billing irregularities and equipment purchase violations. The third went to the IRS, reporting potential tax fraud and unreported income from shell company operations. Each complaint was carefully crafted to suggest individual concerned citizens rather than coordinated law enforcement activity. Rebecca would see disconnected problems rather than the systematic investigation that was actually closing around her like a net. The response was immediate and predictable. Rebecca's Lexus began cruising past our house every hour instead of every 30 minutes. Her surveillance became obvious, desperate, and ultimately criminal as she started photographing license plates of visitors and documenting our daily routines with stalker-like intensity. But the real escalation came when she tried to weaponize government agencies against our family. First, Child Protective Services received an anonymous complaint alleging that Carmen's cancer treatment created unsafe conditions for minors in our home. The investigation was brief and easily disproven, but the stress on our family during Carmen's chemotherapy was unconscionable. Next came building code enforcement, responding to reports of unauthorized modifications and safety violations. The inspector found nothing wrong, but noted that someone had provided detailed photographs of our property, including shots taken from inside our backyard at night. "Ma'am," the inspector told Carmen, "whoever called this in has been conducting surveillance on your property. That's stalking behavior. You might want to call the police." The trespassing charges we filed against Rebecca were just the beginning. Her desperate attempts to intimidate us were providing additional evidence of criminal behavior, while demonstrating consciousness of guilt that federal prosecutors could use to prove criminal intent. Carmen's cancer support group became unexpected allies when Rebecca tried to expand her intimidation campaign. These women had fought battles more serious than HOA tyranny, and they weren't impressed by suburban threats from criminals in designer suits. "Let me understand this correctly," said Patricia Williams, a breast cancer survivor and retired federal prosecutor. "This woman is harassing a cancer patient and military family while stealing community funds? Jake, I still have contacts at DOJ. This needs federal attention." The network of supporters grew daily as Rebecca's desperation led to increasingly reckless behavior. She began targeting anyone who associated with our family, issuing bogus HOA violations to the Martinez family for having us over for dinner, fining the Johnson family for lending us their truck when ours was being repaired, threatening the Santos family with eviction for participating in neighborhood watch activities. Her systematic retaliation against our supporters created a clear pattern of witness intimidation that federal prosecutors could use to enhance charges and increase sentences. Every threat, every bogus fine, every act of retaliation was documented and added to the evidence file that would destroy her. But Rebecca's most critical error came when she tried to have our grandfather's memorial vandalized by proxy. Security cameras captured two teenagers spray painting obscenities on the Purple Heart display case, while Rebecca's Lexus was parked 2 blocks away, its occupant clearly visible watching through binoculars. Desecration of military memorials is a federal crime with mandatory minimum sentencing. The teenagers, when arrested, immediately identified Rebecca as the person who'd paid them $500 to commit what she described as a community service prank. Their testimony would provide direct evidence of Rebecca's criminal intent and willingness to target military honors. The final straw came when Rebecca tried to frame me for insurance fraud by staging damage to community property and claiming I'd vandalized HOA assets in retaliation for enforcement actions. Security footage from neighboring properties captured her accomplices damaging the community center sign, then Rebecca herself planting evidence near our property that was supposed to implicate me. False evidence planting, insurance fraud, filing false police reports, and attempted frame-up of a federal officer. Rebecca had just committed multiple felonies while providing video evidence of her criminal activities. Her desperation had led to exactly the kind of reckless behavior that guarantees federal convictions. Maria Santos called that evening with barely contained excitement. "Jake, we've been monitoring everything through legal surveillance. Rebecca just handed us a RICO case on a silver platter. Insurance fraud, witness intimidation, desecration of military property, false evidence planting. She's looking at 20 years minimum. When do we move?" I asked. "Monday morning. Synchronized raids on all properties, all co-conspirators, all shell companies. We'll hit them so hard they won't know what happened until they're in federal custody." That weekend, our neighborhood held its last community meeting under Rebecca's reign of terror. She presided with increasing desperation, her usual confidence replaced by the paranoia of someone who sensed walls closing in but couldn't identify the source of danger. Recent events have shown that certain residents pose ongoing threats to community harmony, she announced, her voice slightly shrill. We may need to consider additional security measures to protect law-abiding families from criminal elements. The irony was perfect. A criminal describing law enforcement investigation as criminal activity. Rebecca was literally confessing her crimes while accusing her victims of persecution. The federal wiretaps were capturing every word for use during her trial. After the meeting, Eleanor approached me with tears in her eyes. Mr. Rodriguez, whatever you're doing, please finish it soon. She's getting dangerous. Some of us are afraid she might hurt someone before this ends. Eleanor was right to be concerned. Cornered criminals become unpredictable, and Rebecca's escalating behavior suggested someone approaching complete breakdown. But federal law enforcement was ready for whatever desperate measures she might attempt. Monday morning would bring justice for every victim, restitution for every stolen dollar, and federal prison sentences for every co-conspirator. Rebecca's criminal empire was about to collapse with the thoroughness that only federal prosecution can provide. The war was nearly over and victory would be absolute. The federal hammer falls Monday, October 15th, dawned clear and cold. Perfect weather for destroying criminal enterprises. I was having coffee at 6 a.m. when my phone buzzed with a text from Maria Santos. Showtime. Stay inside and keep cameras rolling. At exactly 7:33 a.m., the synchronized federal raids began with military precision. 3 black SUVs surrounded Rebecca's mansion, while a 4th blocked her driveway, preventing any escape attempt. FBI agents in tactical gear emerged like a small army armed with search warrants that would strip away every layer of her criminal operation. The timing was perfect. Rebecca was conducting her morning neighborhood patrol when the federal convoy arrived, catching her in her Lexus wearing workout clothes and the expression of someone who just realized their worst nightmare was coming true. Through my living room window, I watched Special Agent Maria Santos approach the Lexus with the calm professionalism that had made her legendary in federal law enforcement circles. Rebecca's window came down slowly, revealing a face that had cycled through shock, terror, and finally desperate calculation in about 10 seconds. Rebecca Martinez, Maria's voice carried clearly in the morning air. FBI, please step out of the vehicle. You're under arrest for violations of federal RICO statutes, mail fraud, wire fraud, health care fraud, and conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. Rebecca's legs buckled as she tried to exit the Lexus, her designer workout outfit suddenly looking like prison clothing. The handcuffs clicking into place had the sound of absolute justice, captured in high definition by security cameras throughout the neighborhood. This is a mistake, Rebecca stammered, her voice cracking with panic. I'm an elected community official. I have rights. I demand to call my lawyer. You'll have plenty of time to call lawyers, Maria replied with professional calm. Right now, you're under federal arrest for running a continuing criminal enterprise. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it. But Rebecca couldn't remain silent. 26 years of investigating criminals had taught me that sociopaths always believe they can talk their way out of consequences, even when caught red-handed. She was about to provide additional evidence while being arrested. You don't understand, Rebecca protested as agents guided her toward the transport vehicle. I've dedicated 8 years to serving this community. Everything I've done has been for the benefit of property values and neighborhood safety. Maria paused, clearly recognizing the gift Rebecca was providing. Ma'am, serving your community by stealing $2.3 million through fraudulent shell companies? Those are legitimate business relationships, Rebecca insisted, apparently forgetting she was being recorded. Community management requires complex vendor coordination that civilians wouldn't understand. Every word was being captured for use. During trial proceedings, Rebecca was literally confessing to federal crimes while being arrested for those same crimes. The woman's ego was so massive, she couldn't comprehend that her criminal empire was collapsing in real time. Simultaneous raids were hitting Dr. Martinez's medical practice, the storage unit facility, and the homes of 3 co-conspirator HOA presidents. Federal agents were seizing computers, financial records, bank account information, and evidence that would support dozens of federal indictments. Carmen joined me at the window, wearing her cancer treatment scarf and holding a cup of coffee with hands that trembled slightly from chemotherapy but steadied completely when she saw justice being served. "Your grandfather would be proud," she whispered. "Real Americans don't let criminals steal from their neighbors." The FBI evidence recovery team spent 4 hours methodically documenting and removing everything from Rebecca's mansion. Computers, hard drives, filing cabinets full of fraudulent contracts, safes containing cash and gold jewelry purchased with stolen funds, and boxes of documents that would keep federal prosecutors busy for months. The neighbors emerged slowly, like survivors of a natural disaster, watching federal agents carry away evidence of crimes that had been committed against them for years. Mrs. Chen from across the street actually started crying with relief. "Finally," she whispered. "Finally, someone stopped her." By noon, the news vans arrived. "Federal raids target suburban crime ring" became the headline that would make Rebecca infamous throughout the state. The footage of her being perp-walked in handcuffs while federal agents seized luxury cars and boxes of evidence went viral within hours. But the most satisfying moment came when Dr. Eduardo Martinez was arrested at his medical practice. The man who'd enabled his wife's criminal empire, while committing Medicare fraud, collapsed completely when faced with federal charges. His confession began before agents finished reading Miranda rights. "I never wanted this," he sobbed, designer suit rumpled and medical license about to become worthless paper. Rebecca said it was just business optimization. "I didn't know she was stealing from everyone." The federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, held a press conference that afternoon outlining charges that would make Rebecca legendary for all the wrong reasons. This investigation revealed systematic criminal activity spanning multiple jurisdictions and involving theft of over $2.3 million from community associations, insurance companies, and federal healthcare programs. The defendants operated a continuing criminal enterprise disguised as community governance, using intimidation, fraud, and systematic theft to maintain their operation. The evidence in this case is overwhelming, and the sentences will reflect the serious nature of these crimes. 23 separate federal charges against Rebecca alone: racketeering, money laundering, mail fraud, wire fraud, healthcare fraud, insurance fraud, witness intimidation, desecration of military property, filing false reports, and conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. Dr. Martinez faced 18 charges, primarily related to Medicare fraud and money laundering. The 3 co-conspirator HOA presidents each faced multiple felony charges for their roles in the criminal network. The collapse and confession. The federal detention hearing revealed the full scope of Rebecca's criminal empire in gruesome detail. Asset forfeiture proceedings had frozen 14 bank accounts, 7 properties, 4 luxury vehicles, and investment. Portfolios worth over $3.2 million, all purchased with stolen community funds. Rebecca's defense attorney, clearly overwhelmed by the evidence mountain, attempted to negotiate a plea bargain within 48 hours of her arrest. But federal prosecutors weren't interested in deals with criminals who'd targeted military families and cancer patients while stealing from entire communities. "Your client had 8 years to stop committing crimes," Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh told the defense team. "She chose to escalate instead. The federal sentencing guidelines are clear about continuing criminal enterprises." The preliminary hearing provided a preview of the devastating case federal prosecutors had built. Financial expert witnesses testified about money laundering schemes that rivaled organized crime operations. Insurance investigators detailed fraudulent claims totaling $847,000 over 4 years. Medical billing specialists outlined Medicare fraud that had stolen from taxpayers nationwide. But the most damaging testimony came from Rebecca's own co-conspirators, who'd immediately accepted plea bargain agreements in exchange for cooperation. Their detailed confessions revealed planning sessions where Rebecca had outlined expansion strategies for targeting additional communities. She called it franchising the operation, testified former board member Patricia Williams, her voice shaking with shame. Rebecca said we could take our methods to every HOA in the state. That community governance was the perfect cover for systematic theft. The victim impact statements were heartbreaking. Elderly residents on fixed incomes described choosing between medication and inflated HOA dues. Young families outlined financial hardships caused by bogus fines designed to generate revenue. Military veterans detailed psychological trauma from harassment campaigns targeting their service. Carmen's testimony was particularly powerful. Wearing her cancer treatment scarf and speaking with the quiet strength that had carried her through months of chemotherapy, she described Rebecca's attempts to weaponize government agencies against our family during her medical crisis. Mrs. Martinez tried to have our children removed from our home while I was undergoing cancer treatment, Carmen said, her voice steady despite obvious emotion. She desecrated my husband's grandfather's military memorial. She turned community governance into psychological warfare against anyone who questioned her authority. The federal judge, the Honorable Patricia Stone, listened with expressions that grew increasingly grim as evidence mounted. In 30 years on the federal bench, she finally said, I've rarely seen criminal behavior this systematic and cruel. These defendants didn't just steal money, they terrorized an entire community. Rebecca's psychological evaluation, conducted during pretrial detention, revealed personality disorders consistent with sociopathic behavior. The prison psychiatrist noted complete absence of remorse, continuing belief that her actions were justified, and inability to comprehend the impact on victims. The defendant continues to view herself as a community leader who was unfairly targeted by ungrateful residents, the psychiatrist reported. She shows no understanding of the criminal nature of her behavior and expresses anger toward victims for failing to appreciate her dedication. The financial restitution calculations took weeks to complete. Rebecca's criminal enterprise had stolen $2,347,092 from community associations, insurance companies, and federal programs. Interest, penalties, and victim compensation brought the total obligation to over $4.1 million. Asset forfeiture proceedings would recover approximately $3.2 million through sale of properties, vehicles, and investments purchased with stolen funds. The remaining balance would be covered through garnishment of any future income Rebecca might earn after her federal prison sentence. Justice served. The sentencing hearing drew overflow crowds, with victims traveling from 3 counties to witness Rebecca's final downfall. The federal courthouse had never seen such community interest in white-collar crime prosecution, but Rebecca's case had become symbolic of corruption in American neighborhoods. Federal prosecutors recommended the maximum sentence under RICO statutes, 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. The recommendation reflected both the severity of her crimes and the systematic nature of her criminal enterprise. Rebecca's defense attorney made a final plea for leniency, claiming his client had been motivated by desire to improve community standards rather than personal greed. The argument fell flat when prosecutors displayed evidence of Rebecca's luxury lifestyle funded entirely by stolen money. The defendant purchased a $85,000 Lexus, a $120,000 boat, a $340,000 vacation home, and jewelry worth over $95,000 assistant. U.S. Attorney Walsh noted, all paid for with funds stolen from neighbors who trusted her to protect their interests. Judge Stone delivered the sentence with the gravity appropriate for someone who'd betrayed community trust while committing federal crimes. Rebecca Martinez, You have been found guilty of operating a continuing criminal enterprise that systematically stole from your own neighbors over 8 years. You targeted military families, harassed cancer patients, and used community governance as cover for organized crime. Your actions represent a betrayal of democratic principles and basic human decency that demands the most serious federal penalties. 22 years in federal prison, 5 years supervised probation, $4.1 million in restitution, and permanent forfeiture of all assets purchased with criminal proceeds. Dr. Martinez received 12 years for his role in the conspiracy, with similar financial penalties and loss of medical license. The 3 co-conspirator HOA presidents received sentences ranging from 6 to 10 years, with all assets frozen pending restitution payments to their respective communities. The message was clear. Federal law enforcement takes seriously anyone who corrupts American neighborhoods through systematic criminal activity. Community resurrection. The transformation of Sunset Ridge community began immediately after Rebecca's sentencing. The emergency HOA election drew record participation, with Eleanor Santos winning presidency by unanimous vote and immediately implementing radical transparency measures. All financial records were posted online within 24 hours. Every contract was rebid through competitive processes. Monthly town halls replaced secretive board meetings. The community bulletin boards that had once displayed threats and fines now featured information about legitimate community improvements and resident achievements. The federal asset forfeiture funds were used to eliminate HOA dues for 3 years, while funding genuine community improvements. The pool that had been neglected under Rebecca's regime was renovated with equipment that actually worked. Landscaping contracts were rebid at fair market rates, saving the community 60% annually, while improving service quality. But the most meaningful change was cultural. Fear was replaced by genuine community spirit. Neighbors who hadn't spoken for years began organizing block parties, volunteering for community projects, and supporting families facing difficulties. The reign of terror was over, replaced by the democracy that HOAs were supposed to represent. My grandfather's memorial was expanded into a community veterans park, with contributions from grateful neighbors honoring all military families. The Purple Heart that Rebecca had tried to steal became the centerpiece of a larger display celebrating service members from every American conflict. Carmen's cancer treatment concluded successfully 6 months after Rebecca's sentencing, with doctors declaring her in complete remission. The stress reduction from eliminating community harassment had improved her health outcomes measurably, proving that HOA tyranny literally threatens lives. Our twins graduated high school with scholarships, funded partially by community members grateful for our family's fight against corruption. Alex and Diego both decided to study criminal justice, inspired by seeing how federal law enforcement protects communities from organized crime. The ripple effect spread far beyond our neighborhood. Rebecca's case became a textbook example in federal law enforcement training, demonstrating how white-collar crime hides behind legitimate institutions. 3 other HOA criminal enterprises were discovered and prosecuted based on investigative techniques developed during our case. State legislators drafted Rebecca's law, requiring enhanced financial oversight for community associations and criminalizing abuse of HOA authority for personal gain. The legislation passed unanimously, with bipartisan recognition that community governance needs protection from criminal abuse. Real estate agents throughout the state began educating buyers about warning signs of HOA corruption, secretive finances, excessive fines, targeting of specific demographics, and board members who profit from community contracts. Rebecca's crimes had educated an entire industry about protecting homeowners from suburban terrorism. The legacy 5 years after Rebecca Martinez was sentenced to federal prison, Sunset Ridge community has become a model for democratic HOA governance. Property values increased 23% as word spread about our transformation from criminal dictatorship to genuine community cooperation. Rebecca remains in federal prison, with earliest possible release in 2041. Prison records show continuing disciplinary problems related to her inability to accept authority from correctional officers. Some people never learn that actions have consequences. Dr. Martinez was released to a halfway house after serving 8 years, his medical license permanently revoked, and his financial future destroyed by restitution obligations that will follow him for life. He works as a medical equipment salesman, earning a fraction of his former income under permanent federal supervision. The Community Scholarship Fund, established with recovered criminal proceeds, has sent 12 students to college. Every recipient writes an essay about the importance of standing up to corruption, ensuring that future generations understand the price of freedom and the courage required to protect it. Carmen and I celebrated her 5th year cancer-free by hosting the annual Veterans Day ceremony at Grandfather Miguel's Memorial Park. Hundreds of neighbors gathered to honor military service and remember that some things are worth fighting for, whether the enemy wears a foreign uniform or a designer pantsuit. Eleanor Santos, now 89 and still serving as HOA president, gave the keynote address with the wisdom of someone who'd survived both Rebecca's terrorism and the beautiful recovery that followed. This community learned that democracy isn't automatic, she said. It requires citizens brave enough to stand up to criminals who wrap themselves in authority. My investigation training found new purpose in consulting work, helping other communities identify and prosecute HOA corruption. The Rebecca Martinez case established legal precedents that make it easier to pursue federal charges against suburban crime families, disguising themselves as community leadership. But the most satisfying outcome was personal. Our family learned that home isn't just about property ownership. It's about neighbors who protect each other, communities that stand together against corruption, and the knowledge that justice ultimately prevails when good people refuse to be intimidated. The Purple Heart Memorial still sits on our front porch, weatherproof case gleaming in the Arizona sun. Every morning, I pause to remember Grandfather Miguel's sacrifice and the lesson Rebecca Martinez learned too late. Some Americans fight back when criminals target their families, their communities, and their country. What's your HOA horror story? Have you experienced HOA corruption, harassment, or financial fraud? Drop your most shocking stories in the comments below. Your experiences help other communities identify warning signs and fight back against suburban terrorism. Subscribe now to HOA Hidden Stories. We're exposing corruption and criminal behavior in neighborhoods nationwide. Every week, we reveal how ordinary citizens defeat suburban dictators using law, determination, and federal prosecution. Subscribe to HOA Hidden Stories because every neighborhood deserves justice and no criminal should hide behind community governance.